Good evening and welcome to Pray Heal Love, the podcast, where faith meets freedom. This space was created as a safe haven for women who, like me, have been surviving spiritual warfare in a covenant with darkness. I am committed to not only uncovering and exposing that darkness, but also helping you put God first in your healing after narcissistic abuse. I am your host, Brianna Michelle. I'm a survivor of a 16-year-long battle with narcissism. I'm also a coach and a founder of Pray Heal Love, and I'm here to help you break cycles, build boldness, and begin again with God. Let's get into it. This is episode 3, The Story I'll Tell. It's taken me a lot to get here. I've had to overcome fear, thoughts of retaliation, caring about what people who know me will have to say, and so much more, to be able to get to a point where I'm ready to tell this story publicly. Where do I begin? How do I tell this story that's so personal, so deep, so layered, in a way that gets the message across without feeling like I'm trauma dumping? I want to be really intentional about saying that this episode is designed to bring forth true healing and restoration to those who need it, not just to expose anybody. It's bigger than that. Y'all bear with me and say a quick prayer for you, girl, before we get started, because we are going there, and it's about to get real, okay? Okay. And so, because we know that the enemy is the author of confusion, this story may be confusing to some because that's exactly what the entire situation was, a bunch of confusion. But thank God for clarity, amen? Now let's get into it. Disclaimer. Identities of some involved in this story have been heavily protected because of the sensitivity of the subject matter. So try your best to follow along. I will not mention names, genders, or any other revealing information about any parties except myself and the aggressor. Also, before we dive in, I want to give a gentle heads up. This episode contains real, raw accounts of abuse, depression, and spiritual warfare. So if you're currently walking through your own storm or carrying a heavy emotional load, please protect your peace and come back to this when you're in a safe space to receive it. Otherwise, grab your tissues, take a deep breath, and know that this isn't about trauma dumping. This is about healing, clarity, and walking in truth. Let's begin. Okay, so if you listen to episode 1, I talked about a situation where I was put out of my home in August of 2021. If you didn't, go back and check that one out for a little pre-context. Now, I mentioned going back, but I didn't mention that I had another child living there with me at the time, who left on that same day but didn't return. This child was in my care since they were about 9 or 10 years old, full time, and I loved this child as if it were one of my own. Now, after the incident happened where he put me out and I returned, he tried every effort, through me of course, to get the child back in my home. Basically putting a battery in my back to get me to fight for the child's return, saying that it's in the child's best interest to return to our home. Little did I know then that this was his last-ditch effort at keeping his mask on and not being discovered to be the cruel monster that he truly was. I mentioned also that I fell into a deep depression in 2022, and that prompted me to basically ghost everyone and everything that I had built or loved and go into isolation that year. I don't remember much from then, so I'll move on. 2023 was life-changing from literally the first day, January 1st. I talk about this in the book, where we got into a huge fight about my kids being in the kitchen past midnight, and how he came in and raised hell on a day where we were supposed to be celebrating a new start and a fresh chance to make things better between us, at least for the kids. That January 1st argument led to a January 9th fight, where he swung me across the room by my bonnet, pulling a huge patch of hair from my head. That was the last physical altercation we had. That was the last time he put his hands on me. My prayers started turning into, God, you gotta get me out of this. I was still severely depressed, but I would end up reaching out to people to say that I needed to come stay with them, and then ditching that idea, just being scared and not wanting to involve anyone in my mess. Well, after everything had kind of died down and things were semi back to normal, I got a phone call, and the person on the other line told me that they needed to talk to me about something. I didn't think anything of it, but I agreed to call and sit down and talk when I was able to find the time. Well, the time I found was a random Saturday morning in March of 2023 as I was getting ready to go to the grocery store. Now, I had and kind of do still have a very serious marijuana addiction, in all honesty. So when I got this call and the news on the other end of the phone, I was high. All my life, I've tricked myself into believing that weed helps me accomplish tasks and stay focused, when in all actuality, it's only distracted me and helped me to cope with the giant amounts of stress and trauma that I've been subjected to. Anyway, I was high as a kite and on my way to the grocery store when I got the news that the man I had spent the last 16 years of my life with was a child predator and had committed sexual acts against the child that was once in my home. I wrestled with this for weeks, thinking of the when, the where, and the how, without having any details or information to go off of, since emotions were high and nobody was thinking clearly enough to tell me exactly what was going on. I remember thinking maybe this was this person's way of trying to get me out of the home after I told them about the fight and everything that had been going on as of recent. I confronted him about it, and of course, denial. So for a couple weeks, I was in complete disbelief as I gathered what little information I could from others involved who had heard about the story. Now, I mentioned his mother in episode 1, but I didn't mention we had a very close relationship at one point. Me, longing for the mother figure that I lost, and attaching myself to her did sometimes have its benefits. After the accusations were out, and CPS had been called to my home to investigate, I relied on her heavily. I spoke to her during the times that he would be gone to work, and we were both in disbelief together until she said it came to her in a dream that he had done it. With that confirmation, I gained strength and courage that I never had, and I put him out of the home in April of 2023. Now, mind you, my daughter was graduating from 8th grade this same year. The valedictorian of her 8th grade class, who had set a goal for herself to show up every day of the school year, was on the girls' volleyball team, had maintained perfect grades all year, and was destined to finish her elementary school year strong. Having to navigate this and still be a mom and show up for my children, but for her especially, would prove to be one of the hardest things I'd ever done. I felt that I owed it to her to provide her with the stability that she needed to finish her goals. So instead of leaving, I put him out. Somehow, after a 2 a.m. phone call, I walked upstairs, threw a bag at him, and told him to pack his shit and leave. Now, what innocent man would be willing to leave their home without any police interference or fight like he'd usually done? He hardly put up a fight as he packed his things and left the home. He would spend the entire month of April sleeping in his car or wherever he was, only coming in the home to shower and use the bathroom during the times that my kids were at school. During this time, the unhealed version of Brianna would download a dating app and start entertaining random men. This was what she normally did whenever there was a problem in the relationship. She thought it was freedom. She needed to fill the void of not having a person who she dedicated all her time, energy, resources, care, and love to, who was not going to be there anymore, or so she thought. Then on April 20th, she would have an encounter with God that was so powerful it changed her life forever. If you know what 420 is. I'm not explaining it. I mentioned the addiction. We know what I was doing. Let's move on. Only I wasn't celebrating it as a holiday, but literally it was a part of my everyday routine. But I made mention of 420 to show you how God will meet you right down in the middle of your mess and comfort you, lift you, build you. I was in my office downstairs in the home. My children were at school. I had went into the office to start working on a way to gain some income and put together a plan to leave the home once my daughter graduated. If you go back and look at my post on Facebook, I rebranded and relaunched my graphic design business in May of 2021. That was fully out of survival mode. I was trying anything and everything I knew to do after being unemployed, broke, depressed, and in bed for the last year. But on that day, as I sat at my computer and started to listen to gospel music, which was something I never did, I felt the Spirit of the Lord so strongly over me that it brought me to inconsolable tears. And I was arrested in that moment for I don't know how long. It was as if each song was speaking directly to me, and I wish I still had the list of the songs that played. It was as if it was all a long sentence that God was saying to me. I began to praise and pray, cry and break down, and just give in and tell God that I needed Him to fix this for me. Soon after, maybe a day or two later, I went and go and find the Bible in my home that had never been opened and found out that it was my mother's, who died when I was 15. I guess somehow my uncle had it and gave it to me, and I never thought to open it, being that we grew up Muslim. It was the only thing that I had of my mother's, and I didn't even know that I had it. From the day of finding that Bible, I started to read Proverbs, and I would do nothing but pray, listen to gospel, and read the Bible. Still smoking though. I cut out secular music, television, and everything else. I would play sermons loud in the home and videos on YouTube with the Bible verses to sleep. I didn't know what I was doing, but I caught myself saturating our home with the presence of God through people like Sarah Jakes Roberts and others. That led me into a 7-day fast where I wouldn't eat until 4 p.m., all in hopes of gaining some clarity from God on my next move. May of 2023, he re-entered the home. Upon conversation about this after the fact, he told me that he came back because he knew I wasn't going to leave. If I was, I would have done it already, and I couldn't keep him from his home. Granted, he was right. He was on the lease. So here he was, back in the home, sleeping in our son's room and using the basement as his resting area. The atmosphere was so awkward. The kids knew that there was tension between us. The home was sad and depressing. All I could do was pray for a way out. Then, towards the end of May, on a morning where I was getting my kids ready for school, the U.S. Marshals would show up at the door about 7 cars deep and pick him up. I led them directly to where he was and continued to send my children to school. They were literally tying their shoes and leaving to walk across the street to the school at the same time as seeing their father taken out of the home in handcuffs. Honestly, the sigh of relief I had once that man got locked up was unreal. Once again, feeling like everything was over and I could breathe, we'd have our home to ourselves. I answered every detective call that day, and they were asking for information, phone passwords, and everything. And yes, I cooperated. And again, I thought that it was over. I talked about it with my kids, and I told them I didn't know what was going to happen to their dad, but that we would be all right. Only for him to be released that night. Don't ask me why. I don't know. I feel like they had enough evidence to convict. But again, I don't know. All I know is that I broke completely down when he called me after he left the station and said he was on his way home. I broke down even on the phone with him. I was truly and genuinely tired. I thought he was toast, honestly. And to have him just keep popping back up was like, why won't he just go away? That was in May. June would be even more disastrous. He would end up back in the bedroom, just breaking boundary after boundary over and over again. He'd even convinced me to have sex a couple of times. My flesh being weak and deprived, I obliged, but I felt disgusted the entire time. I couldn't enjoy it. I couldn't look at him. He eventually stopped trying because of how turned off I was. We had made it to the finish line with my daughter. Graduation was approaching, and now the real work was about to begin. As I mentioned, my daughter was valedictorian. She had perfect attendance, accepted into an international baccalaureate school. She was overachieving even through watching her life crumble into pieces, even while watching her father be arrested and her mother drown herself in weed and emotions. Even after being questioned by CPS investigators and hearing all the speculation and talks about who her father was. She began to act out in school and ended up taking an edible at school on the last day and having to be hospitalized because of it, losing her valedictorian status and not participating in graduation. I was furious at her, but I now know that she had so much going on mentally that was probably her way of coping and escaping from everything, just like I did privately every day. The same day as my daughter's 8th grade luncheon, I went out with one of my best friends on what was supposed to be a boat cruise. Long story short, he didn't like that I didn't tell him about it or how I was moving. So that prompted another big argument where I basically told him that I didn't care about him, Father's Day, which was approaching, or anything else that he had going on. And so he took my phone from me and found out about the guy I was talking to on the dating apps. Now, mind you, me and that man didn't have any real connection. He was more so giving me business advice and assuring me that he would put me on to clients for my graphic design and website business that I was promoting to get money for the move. But this, of course, enraged the jealous in him, and he ended up starting to take my phone with him every day to work, when that was my only connection to anyone outside of the home that could help me, and my only way to make some money. I felt so lost, so hopeless. I literally didn't see a way out, and it's crazy because literally all hell was breaking loose as I was trying to leave. Now, him knowing about me talking to other men had him in a rage, and he was just stark raving mad. Like, it was like he was trying to intimidate me, and I was still so determined to make my plan work. The end of June would go out with a bang as we got into a very heated altercation where he tried to snatch another phone from me when I was calling my friend to come get me and the kids. This would end with my daughter becoming so fed up that she went to taking the picture frames off the walls and smashing them to the floor. I mean, it was literally hell in that house. Now it's late June, early July. I'm home all day. Kids are out of school. He's the moneymaker at the time, finally. So he's leaving every day with my phone and gone for hours at a time. The only access we have to the outside world is my laptop and the TV. Then he decides he's not going to pay the Wi-Fi bill, interfering with my plan to make money, and I have been actively taking clients. I don't know how many months late we were on that Wi-Fi bill, but it was set to be suspended and service shut off. But let me tell you about my guy. The internet was still working. I don't know how, but he did it. Me and my kids used to have to hurry up and turn off the TV when he came in, so he didn't know it was working. We would all be huddled together on the couches watching YouTube series and have to hurry and shut it down as soon as we heard the door opening. I would sit on my broken laptop and plot our move while he was gone, and do design work on Photoshop while he was there, saying that it was my therapy and the only thing I could do since there was no internet. During this time, me and my kids' bond grew so strong. They realized that what we were in was a nightmare, and I believe they really sought comfort in me through the whole thing. He would try to keep his authority in the home by setting a rule that the kids could not have snacks, claiming that they needed to eat healthy, and trying to implement a very strict diet that none of us had agreed to or were used to. And so I would DoorDash them cookies from McDonald's, and we eat them and hide the packaging. Anything to keep smiles on their faces, even though I was dying inside. I talked them through the entire process of us leaving, keeping faith in God that I knew something was going to happen for us and we would soon be free. Now, remember I told you I was taking clients for graphic design. During this time, I would secure 2 projects. One client was more spiritual, and from a woman that turned into a friend that I'll cherish in my heart forever. She really helped me through that phase of my life, and I'm so bad now with relationships and people that we no longer speak. But I want her to know that I'm forever grateful for everything she poured into and pulled out of me. She would she would talk to me every day about getting a plan together. Also, she would bring me food, and she was just a comfort to me even after I left. Again, let me tell you how God works. I told y'all I rebranded my business, and so I had a former client trying to find me from the old business name and couldn't find anything because I deleted all the old social media, websites, and everything. This man literally sought after me until he found me right when I needed him. He went through an old friend and a former coworker who reached out to me on the 4th of July and told me that this client had been looking for me to do his rebrand for his company. I had previously done an amazing job, but he wanted to go in a different direction. It just so happened that I had just increased my prices due to needing to leave, and so yesterday's price was not today's price. We discussed specifics, and he was ready to pay and get the work done. I ended up telling the narcissist that I had a client and I needed my phone back. I told him that it was the only thing with service I could connect the hotspot. I had to do this work. He agreed to give it back, and to work I went. Now, he didn't know that my prices had changed because I didn't discuss it with him. He had known my clients to give enough money for me to have some weed or buy a new wig, but I don't think he was prepared for this client. I had deposit, work finished, and final installment secured in 12 days. The service package I sold to this client was altogether $1,400. I had had enough money to do something with. Now I had to seek God for what exactly that something was. Now, this whole time I was seeking God for where to go. I had narrowed it down to 3 places. One night, after the money was secured, somehow I forget how, I came across Psalm 55, verse 20 to 21. Right now, as I'm thinking about it, I feel like it was either in a dream or whispered to me. But it reads, "My companion attacks his friends. He violates the covenant. His talk is as smooth as butter, yet war is in his heart. His words are more soothing than oil, yet they are drawn swords." And when I tell y'all I was laying next to that man while he was asleep, silently bawling like a baby, I don't know what it was. It was like something broke or lifted, like God was telling me exactly who I was dealing with. Anyway, not long after that, I got on TikTok, mindlessly scrolling, and found a lady that eats here in Houston. I wasn't even paying attention to her video. I was looking at the location stamp, and it was as if God said, "That's it." But it wasn't clear to me, so I started praying. I said, "God, if you want me to move to Houston, when I leave this house tomorrow to take Shania to summer volleyball practice, I want you to show me green cars on the road." And I went to sleep. Now, because I didn't drive, the next day we ended up getting up to take my daughter to practice. And as we pull into the parking lot of Morgan Park High School, I see 2 of the most interesting shades of green cars that I had seen probably ever. Pulling out of the school parking lot, a green 18-wheeler was crossing the intersection. And if that wasn't enough, a green car led us off the expressway and stayed in front of us for at least a mile before we turned onto the street that would lead us to the house. It was as if God was saying, "Come follow me," in that moment. So that was my confirmation. Houston it was. I kept telling my kids that we were going on an adventure. After fees and tithing to a ministry I was a part of, I had $1,200 to my name that he knew nothing about. I'd ordered a government phone and hid it in a purse that I kept downstairs in my office. All in the span of 2 weeks, I cleaned the house, put all the important documents in one folder. I had my kids roll up the clothes in their drawers so we would know which ones we were taking, and secured everything that we would need in 2 suitcases and 4 bags that were packed the night before we left. I would call his mother and tell her to come over and act as if she was getting her hair braided. She would be my getaway and my excuse to make it look like everything was normal that day. She came over, got her hair braided. I put everything in the car and left the phone he paid for, our joint account debit card, and the ring with a note that said actions have consequences. The next day, me and my children would board a Greyhound bus with our bags and spend 2 days traveling to Texas. I'm going to stop this story here, although there is so much more to talk about. I haven't even begun to talk about the miracles that have happened since we stepped off that bus. But you're going to have to come back for part 2. I know this was a lot to take in. If you're still here with me, thank you. I didn't share this for shock value. I share this so you know that you're not alone, that God still moves in chaos, that even when the house is burning, His hand can still pull you out. But this is just the beginning. In the next episode, I want to take you back through the marriage, not just the moments, but the meaning, what I didn't know I had entered into, the spiritual covenant I agreed to without realizing what I was binding myself to. So meet me back here next week, because yeah, we're going there too. In the meantime, I want you to reflect on this. What is God asking you to let go of so He can lead you out? Sit with that. Write about it. Pray on it. If you don't have the Pray Heal Love journal yet, this is the perfect time to grab it. It was designed for moments like this, to help you process the heavy, unpack the pain, and reconnect with God in your healing. You can get yours now at PrayHealLove.com. Meanwhile, take your time, be gentle with yourself, and I'll see you next week with part 2. That wraps up this week's episode of Pray Heal Love, the podcast. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing, truth, and restoration. I pray today's conversation met you right where you were and left you a little lighter, a little stronger, and a little more healed and empowered. If this episode blessed you, don't forget to subscribe and come back next week. We're just getting started. Follow my socials in the description box below and tap into our growing community of survivors and faith-filled women rebuilding their lives with power and purpose. You could also grab your copy of my book, Pray Heal Love, and learn more about the mission at PrayHealLove.com. Remember, just because it broke you doesn't mean it gets to define you. You are becoming, you are healing, and most of all, you are deeply loved. Until next time, stay grounded in truth and wrapped in grace. This is Pray Heal Love.